While playing through the prologue of Red Dead Redemption 2 recently, again, I was sort of enamored by the way Arthur read out his journal entry. I thought it was a super cool way to tell the thoughts of the character. But it also got me thinking whether or not there was a difference between Arthur's journal entries if you play him high honor or if you play him low honor. And to this day, I don't know if there is a difference because I never play him low honor and I didn't go look it up. So, but what I did do is have the thought that it would be really cool to see what you could tell about the last Dragonborn from their journal entries in Skyrim. And that's sort of what this video is about. And that's how I got to the concept. But I do think it's kind of an interesting point that arises from the concept of having a journal of a character, because obviously journals are kind of deeply personal, even if they aren't as diary style as some journals can be, and certainly how the journals in Skyrim come out, even if they're more like, in a way, a log of events, like the Dragonborn tends to keep more so. They're still really interesting and good looks into the perspective of people. And so from the perspective of the Elder Scrolls games, who have, or at least from my opinion, formed themselves on the concept like their main characters are a lot more of a mold. They're not really so much of a character as they are just sort of a series of plot points. Whereas the Fallout games were the ones that had a character who was, they were a character with minimal customization, with like Fallout New Vegas, at least of the 3D games, being the one where you kind of got a little bit more freedom to decide exactly what your character was like. Whereas 3 and 4 were 100%. You play as like a 19-year-old kid in Fallout 3 who lost his dad, and in Fallout 4 you play as like a 30-year-old white man veteran dude who lost his son, or you could play as the woman. But who does that? I do that. I do that all the time. I love playing as Nora. But the Elder Scrolls games didn't really come off like that. And I never really look at Elder Scrolls from the perspective of, oh, I'm playing a character here. Like I would be playing Geralt. But the last Dragonborn's journal is pretty much as close as you could get, in my opinion, to really understanding who the character was, who the guy was, the person, what he was like to talk to, what he did the things for, like why did he go on this big quest. Oddly enough, looking at his journal, I believe you can pretty much kind of get an idea of why he did the things he did. So the plan for the video is I'm going to go through a couple of things. It's going to be kind of split into two parts. I'm going to go into his general personality, like things you can sort of glean about his personality from the way that he writes. And by the way, when I'm saying he, I'm referring to like sort of like the human he, not really so much like it's a guy, like it's a dude, it's a male. So just a little, whatever that thing is called, second, third, one of them persons that they the perspectives or whatever. But yes, I'm gonna go into his general personality. I can never stay on the topic. I'm gonna go into his general personality, and then at the end I'm gonna talk about his motivation. I have been captured by the Empire and sentenced to death alongside the Stormcloak rebels. We were taken to Helgen, but before I could be executed, a dragon appeared and attacked the town. I need to find some way to escape. This entry is notable for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it's the very first entry the Dragonborn ever makes in their journal. It's where you get control of them, essentially. It's where your hands get free. The Dragonborn does not write anything until they get into at least the keep. And that is super interesting for a number of different reasons. Because one, it implies that the Dragonborn is writing this journal entry as the dragon is attacking Helgen. So he gets captured by the Empire. He almost gets sentenced to death. The dragon attacks, sends meteors down, starts killing folks. He runs into the keep with one of the two guys, and then he's like, you know what I could do right now? I could do with some good old-fashioned journaling, some chronicling. And he starts whipping out a paragraph. That's insane. That's insane behavior. Or it's the behavior of somebody who's extraordinarily calm and collected, and also does very well under pressure. Now I could be stretching that, but personally, that's in the game. I didn't tell him to write that shit. They wrote that shit. And he wrote that shit as a dragon was attacking him. I think that's a fair point to make. It's a very calm and collected individual. Also, a couple other things to note is this serves as an example of how to verify timelines. In my personal opinion, at least as far as the journal is concerned. You understand, this is only from the perspective of what is in the journal. We can use that to then sort of contextually apply that to the situations they're in, which of course you kind of need to. But at the same time, it's not like we have the dialogue from what they say to NPCs during these quests. Because, at the very most you could determine like, oh, they said this because this is the only thing they say that allows you to go forward. But this is a journal video. This ain't the dialogue video, okay? So we're going to talk about the damn journal. which we're doing. But in terms of verifying timelines that this lets us know is they distinctly refer to the Empire as the Empire and the Stormcloak Rebels as the Stormcloak Rebels, which we understand notably is different from the way they refer to these factions if you were to join them in the Civil War quest. Notably, they refer to the Empire as then the Imperial Legion when you go to join them, and they refer to the Stormcloak Rebels as first the Stormcloaks when you're joining them, and then once you join them, they refer to them as the Sons of Skyrim, which implies association, which implies an agreement with a cause, perhaps. But the term rebels doesn't really necessarily determine that you don't agree with the cause. It just implies a degree of separation, like not associated with it. Because typically rebels don't really call themselves rebels. And even tyrannical oppressors kind of like to use terms that are more descriptive. They kind of make them seem even worse than just the term rebels are. So I think that's pretty interesting. It comes off that they're able not only to write things in a decently impartial manner given the circumstances, but also that they are not associated with the Empire or the Stormcloak Rebels when they get to Helgen and as Helgen is going down. Now obviously you pick one of two, Hadvar or Ralof, and that can kind of be interesting later on, but for the most part it's not very, as far as this journal entry is concerned. I did look in to try to see if this was sort of something that was more unique to the Dragonborns as a whole and not just the last Dragonborn, but for the most part I couldn't really tell if that was true or not. It seems false because I used two of the rather well-known Dragonborns who we know a little bit more about, that being Wolfhearth and Miraak, and these are kind of really good because they're both Skyrim guys. They like Skyrim stuff, you know. They're kind of cool Skyrim dudes like we do. Wolfhearth, I wouldn't really describe him as somebody that was necessarily very calm. Even before he became very notable for being a Dragonborn, he was a known warmongerer and participated in what some might call a couple of massacres of indigenous people. And then when he did die, oh, by the way, he died and then came back to life a few times. And then when he did do that, he was known to have like grudges and fight people for the fuck of it, allegedly. And then also he cursed the tomb of the Riemann emperors before sealing it. Not really a thing I would say is coming off like, you know, an impartial guy that's just trying to do his thing. And I think he was kind of an upset individual at the very least. Miraak, another known Dragonborn. In fact, what people say, the first Dragonborn, which is stupid because we're the first. Okay, I'm not gonna put that in. What do people call the first Dragonborn? That's what they call him. We kind of don't really get a good picture of what his personality was like before he lost his revolution, because after he loses his revolution, he's stuck in a pocket for a couple 10,000 years, and he has to listen to Hermaeus Mora talk his fucking ear off, and we know that motherfucker talks at the speed that snails fuck. So if I was Miraak, I'd probably would have blown my fucking head off at this point. The fact that he hasn't doesn't tell me anything more than he's got unusual willpower, which is fantastic for him. Congratulations, he still dies. But yeah, I think this is more of a trait that's just more particular to the last Dragonborn and not just applicable to everybody. So these quotes here are from the quest The Way of the Voiced, and there's a couple of different things here that sort of lead to this concept, but the real hard hitters come from a different quest, which we'll talk about right after this. But the line here that I want to focus on is, I spoke to Arngir, one of the Greybeards, who believes that I am Dragonborn, which means I am especially gifted in the use of the voice. They have offered to help me learn to use my new abilities. These sequences kind of go together, where this doesn't really lend so much credence to the concept that the Dragonborn is unnaturally trusting, but it does lend more credence that the Dragonborn is in fact a Nord, because I feel like, you know, a Nord would be all too eager to go to the Greybeards and learn from them and believe what they're saying. But if you lead that into the entry that we see in the quest A Blade in the Dark, it does a couple of different things. The entry is, Delphine, the innkeeper in Riverwood, is more than she seems. She was the one that left me the note in Ustengrav. She gave me back the horn of Jorgen Windcaller. She went through a lot of trouble to get my attention. I should find out what she wants. Now this tells us a couple of different things. It tells us, one, he is rather trusting. The Dragonborn is rather trusting. Maybe not unnaturally trusting just from these entries, but he is exceptionally trusting. Because number one, if he is a person who trusts the Greybeards because he's a Nord, well then he would look at the actions of a thief of the horn of Jorgen Windcaller and probably not trust them too much. Okay, but if he didn't trust her from that perspective, he's very unnaturally trusting. But if he only trusts the Greybeards generally, like he's a rather trusting individual, he needs to just trust the Greybeard. He trusts the Greybeards because he doesn't think that they're, you know, bad guys. And then he goes on to trust the Blades because he doesn't have a stake in the Greybeards' equipment, but he can kind of sort of glean perhaps that they don't seem like they're that big a deal, because they say, hey, a friend at the end of it. They got to be a pretty cool guy. I think both instances pretty much establish that they're very trusting, with the former, them being annoyed and being extremely trusting of the Greybeards, makes them unnaturally trusting of Delphine. So I'm more inclined to put them in the second category, or whichever one that's less trusting. I can't remember how I listed them. I'm pretty sure it was the first one. I have memory retention issues. The second thing that gets brought up with these entries is that even though they are very trusting, they're not like a gullible idiot. They're not some sort of great big gullible fool, right? They can look at Delphine and see through the concept that she has more to her than just what she's presenting. They can look at her actions and say, she went through a lot of trouble to get my attention. It acknowledges that people have intention, and that they have actions that go into those intention. Like there's effort behind intention, which is important because it plays into something that we'll talk later on, like right after this. But it also establishes the concept that they don't believe that everybody is just a great guy. They just happen to know who they can trust and not trust, I guess. It still makes them very, very exceptionally trusting in my personal opinion, but not in a way that's just because they don't know how the world works. They do, they just past that still believe in the good of humanity, I guess. So I think the Dragonborn is very exceptionally trusting because of that. And bleeding in from that last point, when we look at an entry from the quest, Diplomatic Immunity, we sort of see something that builds on that concept of trusting, but not being a complete idiot, not being a complete gullible fool. But we also see it building towards something else, a new establishment, and it comes from this entry. It seems that things are worse than even Delphine thought. Dragons aren't just coming back to life, they're being resurrected by other dragons. Delphine suspects that the Thalmor might be bringing dragons back for some sinister purpose. She's going to help me infiltrate the Thalmor Ambassador's manor and find out what they know about the dragons. I should meet her contact Melbourne in the Winking Skeever and in Solitude. So this is an establishment to another idea, that the Dragonborn is not that arrogant of a guy. He's not very narcissistic in nature, at least from what the journal entries of the main quest story tell me, I guess this is my opinion here. But one that agrees with the concept that they're not a gullible idiot. They kind of understand that people have motivations. But the other thing it establishes is the wording of, she's going to help me. And this is something that I think is something that people who are super arrogant, and especially people who are very narcissistic, don't talk like. Like, you gotta understand, from their personal journal, they are pinning a line where they acknowledge that somebody is going to help them, which establishes that they are receiving help and that help is substantial enough to know. Both, from my perspective, an arrogant person wouldn't really care. They would probably just say something like, I'm going to infiltrate the Thalmor Ambassador's manor. They even go so far as to say they're Delphine's opinion, whereas an arrogant person may or may not do that, I don't know, but they state that Delphine believes this, and that Delphine suspects this, and that she's going to then help him infiltrate the Thalmor Ambassador's manor, which is a kind of an interesting point. If this character is super narcissistic or super arrogant, I just don't see them writing that in their personal journal. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but I think that arrogant people don't write like that because I don't write like that. I don't know. I just think it's a cool point. But there's a second point here that kind of builds on this. It comes from the quote, comes from the quest Season Unending, and its quote goes like this: the Jarl of Whiterun wouldn't help me capture a dragon as long as the civil war was raging. Arngir agreed to host a peace council at High Hrothgar. With Esbern's help, I persuaded General Tellius and Ulfric Stormcloak to agree to a truce in order to defeat Alduin, who is a threat to both sides in the civil war. Now, I probably don't need to tell you this, but the important bit here is with Esbern's help. Again, acknowledging somebody's help, again acknowledging that somebody could help, again acknowledging that somebody needed to help or should have helped or did help. I think that again doesn't really lend credence to the concept that they're very arrogant. It also establishes, in my head, that they have a respect for Esbern. And I gotta be honest with you, one of the things that really kicked off this concept that they're not very arrogant is when I read this with Esbern's help, I was confused, because I didn't know what he was talking about. I don't do the Peace Council too often, as you might understand, but even then I had to go back and review about what exactly he meant by with Esbern's help. And Esbern gets up and does like a little speech, and it's very notable, and I do remember it, but I guess I don't think of it as something that was like, oh yeah, Esbern helped me convince them. Without him, it wouldn't have happened. I don't think that, and I'm the player character. Maybe I'm more arrogant than I let on, I don't know. But from my perspective, you gotta understand, the Dragonborn has spent the last like 6 fucking days running across the map both ways to get to these fucking crybaby ass war leaders and have them say like, oh, we don't want to go unless this happens. Dragonborns. It's like, I don't give a shit. Take your ass up there or you're gonna get eaten by a fucking dragon. From the perspective of an arrogant Dragonborn, this guy has done all the work. And even from a perspective of a not arrogant Dragonborn, he's done a majority of the work. So acknowledging Esbern's help there, both in my head establishes that he kind of respects Esbern's abilities, or at least his knowledge when it comes to ancient dragons. But also I think it establishes that the Dragonborn's not exceptionally arrogant at the very least, but I kind of believe they're not very arrogant at all. Okay, so this one may be one of my weakest points. I'll admit that up top. Not like I spent a fucking whole 16 days researching this and piling it together. I looked at it for like an hour and I thought about it. All right, that's what you get with this upfront transparency. That's what you get. But even with that, you can at least know that this is probably one of my weakest points. Okay, now getting into it. There's only 3 times. Well, sorry, there's only 2 times that the Dragonborn ever directly notes there's a reward involved. In fact, he only ever writes the word reward twice, which builds, and these are those, by the way, these are the 3 times that he writes that, which builds on the idea that he's not particularly concerned with the reward. And even in the context in which he is talking about the reward, it's only from the perspective of like, hey, yo, you can get a reward for this, by the way. Ah, sick. I should go and get my reward for like a job well done. You know, like that's not like a greedy thing to say, even when he does mention it. And then he never mentions it again, right? After this, he does the dragon thing with the fight, the dragon fight with Murmulnir. He fights Murmulnir, kills Murmulnir. That's spoilers. But then he fucks off to go do like some Destiny bullshit. You feel me? So, in conclusion, I don't think the Dragonborn is that greedy. Okay, next point. Hold on, let me take my sweater off. It's kind of hot in here. Ugh. No, my toboggan. No, my, what is this? Oh, no, my rag. I've got a rag on my head. It keeps my hair from getting in my eyes. Okay. The first portion of the game, you know, like post Helgen, pre Riverwood. What's the Dragonborn doing and why? Right, that's the whole purpose of the motivation section of this video here. Why is he doing what he's doing? It's a good question. I think he's doing what he's doing in the first half, before the Murmulnir fight, because he's just sort of like out to help folk. You know, he's just having a good time. You feel me? I think he's just like, you know, he escapes a dragon fight. He's kind of a calm cucumber. He escapes the dragon fight, prances his ass down to Riverwood, or, you know, maybe he does not. Fun fact, you don't have to do that. You could just go straight to Whiterun. But even if you do go straight to Whiterun, he notes in his journal that he should go and speak to the Jarl, presumably about the dragon issue, because when you go and speak to the Jarl, that's the only thing you have to fucking say to him. And that's the only reason they let you in, maybe. So when the folks in Riverwood come through and they're like, hey, yo, brother, can you help me out? And he's like, you know what, shit, I can help you out. And it's not even that big a deal for real. I'll just go and bust one real quick down to Whiterun, wherever that's at, and talk to this Jarl fella. And that's what he does. And then he talks to the Jarl fella about the Bleak Falls issue. Bing, bang, boom. He's at Bleak Falls Barrow. Personally, I think that's kind of ridiculous. Why are you out here delving into dungeons and shit? I think that's the mark of a man who's just sort of, hey, you know what, I can help you. And it's not that hard, so I might as well. You know, shit, I ain't got nothing going on. So I think from the first perspective, from the first half of the game, that first quarter of the game, he's really just doing it because he's just doing it for the love of the game, I guess is the saying. Yes, that's my, and then the next point as well. This is sort of an in-betweener section. He has 2 motivations, I guess is the way to say it. In the first half, we see him just sort of like, hey, yo, dog, I'm a good dude, you feel me? But in the second half, it's the same motivation. But we don't get it confirmed what motivation it is. We just see the workings in the journal, in the entries in the journal, that it is a separate motivation. That he's done being just a nice guy. He's got some other shit on his head now. And these are the entries that sort of prove that in my head, where we see him talk about meeting with Arngeir and being recognized as Dragonborn, and then also believing Arngeir and doing what Arngeir says, which is fair. If you believe in that, I guess. He's kind of a trusting fellow, as we've established. He also talks about meeting with Delphine, and just he trusts Delphine. So clearly there's some inner workings there. We don't know exactly why he, excuse me. We don't know exactly why he's trusting Delphine, but he is doing that. So he's got some motivation for it. He believes that she's going to help him get into the Thalmor Ambassador's embassy. which I think is probably the greatest point that could ever have been, that he has some sort of internal motivation that we ain't too sure about. He also talks about that he hopes Esbern is as knowledgeable about dragons as Delphine promised. I don't know how to say this in any other way than just, if you're hoping for some shit, you got motivations, brother. You know, even if it's for food, you're hoping to not die or to eat well. I don't know, one of the two. You at least got something going on that's greater than just like, you know what, I should probably help a fella out, right? Like, there's a difference between helping people and then saving the world. Like, if I asked you, hey, dog, can you hand me my phone on the counter? You said, you know what, I can do that. It's pretty easy. And I also asked you, hey, dog, could you end world hunger? You might look at me and go, what the fuck are you talking about right now, right? And I think that's a fair question. But also, I think that the differences between the motivations of a man who's out to just like help out a one-time miller or one-time blacksmith in Riverwood is a lot more apparent and easy to divulge. Oh, what's the one? Easy to find out and figure out than the motivations of a person who is trying to save the world for whatever reason. But we do get it confirmed, I think personally, what exactly their motivation is. So, recap here. I know I'm kind of I've recorded this at a different time than the other stuff, so it may come off a bit disjointed. I'm not gonna apologize for that though. That's just me. So that's a recap again, right? The recap. So in the middle, post Murmulnir, they got a different motivation, but it's the same motivation. Pre Murmulnir, they're just out to help folk. We don't get it confirmed what the second motivation is, in my opinion, until the very last entry in the main quest journal, and that's this one right here. It goes, I'm not gonna read all this, but the last sentences, I have fulfilled my destiny as Dragonborn. Now, me personally, I think that's a very insightful sentence. The last sentence a man writes in the journal, presumably, right? Canonically. I don't know what else he writes, right? He writes a lot of stuff, but in the main quest, it's the last words. If you were to ask a criminal, okay, hey, why'd you rob that bank? And if they told you, I did it for the money, obviously you probably did it for the money. But that's not really what I'm asking you. Why'd you want the money is why I'm asking you. And they might say some shit like, hey, I needed to eat. And you can probably discern their reasons from there. But imagine a man, a master at his craft, devoted in this great quest. Like an NBA player. Go and ask an NBA player why they did it. Why they trained all these damn years. You know, went through college, had to put up whatever the fuck went on in college, you know, like communal showers and shit. That shit's weird. We ain't Korean. Maybe they are. I don't know. But imagine asking them, why did you put up with all that? And then they told you the reason, right? Like, that would be the reason for it all. That seems like a really obvious thing to say, but that's what it is here as well. Also, admitting I did it for destiny, right? Now, this is deeper than just, oh, it was my destiny or whatever. I think this is more pinpointing the concept that, like, it's not for revenge or a sense of justice. He's not mad at the dragons because they killing folk and he's out to, like, kill the main one. He's not like, I'm gonna get these motherfuckers back. It's not revenge. It's not like a sense of justice, like, oh, think of all the people you've killed. I've got to right this wrong. It's not that. And it's not even particularly for a sense of, and this is my opinion here, it's not even particularly for a sense of just doing it because if he doesn't do it, the world will end. I think it's more of a sense of just giving yourself the destiny, right? Like, you look at the destiny, you get told your general destiny from the Greybeards, and you look at that and you say, okay, one way or another, this will happen. Regardless of how I do it or how I make my decisions or input or effort, it will happen. So instead of just like fucking off and whacking off and then letting destiny come one way or the other, I might as well just put my best foot forward. You know, I might as well try. There's nothing wrong with trying. Weirdly enough, he's kind of the perfect antagonist for a game like this. And I'm kind of I'm having trouble kind of trying to put it together. Like, did they make him like this? Did they write him intentionally like this to where it was rather easy to discern through his journal? And I picked up on that rather easily? Or is this just like me headcanoning this and like it just happens to line up because like why the fuck wouldn't it? They're meant to be vague entries or something? I don't know. But I think the Dragonborn is a person who would have of course just helped out people in Riverwood, which would have led him to the Jarl, and he would of course just helped out the Jarl, which would have led him to Murmulnir, as the destiny thing goes. And then once he gets to the Greybeards and discover his destiny, I think the archetype, the Jungian archetype of character here is the exact type of person that would just give themselves to destiny. Just try. As a person who's playing this character, we often make them whatever we want to be that's not very in line with exactly this type of person as I'm saying here. We don't always make a person who's super confident. Like if you look at Gopher's playthrough with this guy Richard, I think his name was. You know, he's not a super confident guy at first, I think. I would say so. Not everybody you play is super, in a way benevolent. People are sometimes very greedy with the way they play their Dragonborns. You kind of get what I'm saying here, right? Like, we often like skirt and just make our own characters, like, sort of headcanon, role play, they say. And that's cool or whatever. But if you're a casual gamer, like you're just a guy that comes in and doesn't really know what's going on in Skyrim and sort of just meandering about following the quest points, like, you're kind of the way the Dragonborn is, in a way. You kind of just do things because people are telling you to do them, and you don't really understand what's going on, but you kind of just feel that there's a thing to it. There's a thing, it's leading you somewhere regardless. And I think that's kind of a weird joining of ideas. If that's a good way to say that in English. Because Skyrim is, in its lineage, the casual Elder Scrolls game. It's more casual than Oblivion, which is more casual than Morrowind. And then you get into, like, the ones that look like Mario fucking.
Hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
And we can stop talking about them there. But the Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls have gotten more and more casual, very intentionally, as the games have gone on. And I just think it's super interesting to see that Skyrim and Skyrim's protagonists kind of share that mindset. I do also want to note, I've not looked into whether Oblivion is like this or not. And I've also not looked in to see if Morrowind is like this or not. I'm just saying this from the perspective of Skyrim, and also because I don't want to look those up, because that's more work than I want to do, and I don't feel like it. So that's the end of that. But I know it's just a sort of an interesting observation, and I ain't got no like Carl Jobst summoning salt directing power in me to make this like super like music-y where it goes oh at the end of it when everybody finds out, like it leads into like a bigger point or something like that. But I do think it's an interesting thing to note, so I did do that. I also noted it. Did you guys know the YouTube channel Chris and Jack? Jack is the guy who voices Sokka from Aang. From Avatar, The Last Airbender? Did you know that? I didn't know that. I did not know that. I saw his face when I was real young, and he looked super cool. And then I didn't see him again for like 20 years, and then I didn't know that was him. And then I did know that because I looked up. What was I doing? Oh, right. I replayed through SpongeBob, I think the movie where they had the game on PS2, and they have extras. You know how games used to have extras? They have extras on the games, and I went into the extras, and then boom, Avatar: The Last Airbender extra, where they had a trailer for the show before it came out, and I was like, wow, that's crazy, and I looked it up, because it said it was meant to drop in November of 2002, I believe, but it didn't do that. It dropped. No, wait, hold on, my times is wrong. It was meant to drop in November of 2004, but it didn't do that. It dropped in 2005, and I knew that it dropped in 2005 because I saw the premiere on my CRT TV in my grandmother's living room, and I watched it for the entirety of its show from 2005 into 2008. So I thought that was rather odd, and then that's true that it did do that. So they delayed it, and also some of the words were different. I thought it was super interesting. Anyways, I found out he was the voice actor, and then also he was on his YouTube channel. That was super cool. Was that all I have to say? I think that's all I have to say. Goodbye.